I call this meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. We do have an agenda in front of us and an HR addendum.
I move approval of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum to go with item 5B, the regular HR report.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor of following the agenda as presented, please vote by saying yes.
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 Any opposed, no. Recognition of the audience, nobody has chosen to address the board tonight, so we will move forward there. Welcome to everybody who is sitting home on this beautiful night watching us on Channel 12. Staff reports. First of all, though, can we go a little out of order? There's an introduction that needs to be made. So, Mr. Leeds, would you like to do that?
Absolutely. Madam President, members of the board, thank you. Very happy to introduce to you this evening, and I introduced you to some of you at dinner. Brittany Nykel, sitting to my left, is our new HR director. Brittany comes to us from NDSU, where she had a 15-year career in the human resources field, starting as an intern right after her degree there, and had worked her way through the ranks and came to us most recently as the Associate Director of Human Resources from NDSU, and brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to our position. Certainly, as you all have expressed, and we understand in the district as well, we're very sad to be losing Cheryl and the institutional knowledge that she brought and everything that her experience has brought us. I think we're very fortunate to find somebody like Brittany who brings the knowledge of the HR profession as well as the background in education from the higher ed circles and really a good understanding of the profession itself. So happy to introduce Brittany to all of you. We have as a cabinet decided that this position would be a cabinet level position going forward. It will still be under my umbrella, much like Cheryl was, but certainly given the nature of a number of the items we deal with, we think it's important to have this position at the cabinet level, and Dr. Schatz made that recommendation and visited with the cabinet about it. So Brittany will be joining us at board meetings and will be a real integral part of the leadership team going forward. So you met some of the folks at break. Certainly you can meet others of them, and she'll be joining us going forward.
Welcome. All right, moving on to 4A, staff reports. Dr. Gross, student mobility report.
Well, thank you very much. In your packet, you will find memo 139, and that is attached, or attached to it, is the mobility report for this school year. After the first semester, I shared with you the preliminary report that was for our first semester, and I just want to share similar data with you now that the school year is completed. So the data that is in that report is from August 27th through May 27th. And on page 1 of the report, what you will see, there are two sets of data. Really, they are the same sets of data, just in two different formats. The first one shows you the total number of students who transferred into the district and the total number of students who transferred out of the district by level. So you have elementary, middle school, and high school. And then you have the total. So the set of data that is near the middle of the screen right now is just the numbers. Below then is a very simple bar graph so that you can see that information provided for you. One thing I do want to point out is, if you'll notice, in total we had almost 1,000 students transfer in, and we had just a little over 1,000 transfer out. So quite a large number of students moving in and out of our district over the course of the school year. Then, as you look or continue through that report, starting on page 2, what you will see is the data broken down by elementary, middle school, and high school. The first two sets of charts provide you the data for the students who transferred into the district at the elementary level. What we did is we just provided for you the locations where those students came from. You'll see, for example, on the screen, the orange would be from our private schools locally, and then as you go around that pie chart all the way to the largest percentage at the elementary transferring in from out of state, not Minnesota or North Dakota. We provided that same data for you for the students who transferred out at the elementary level. And They somewhat parallel one another. There are some slight variances as you look at the in and out, but just so that you have that information. And then on page 4, you'll see the same information for middle school students, same color configuration, same categories of the students who transferred into the Fargo Public Schools during this school year at the middle level, and the percentage of students who transferred out of the Fargo Public Schools, and again, where they went to after they left our system. And then on page 5, the same set of data, both in and out at the high school level for the last school year. And then finally, on page 5, the last set of data that's there, we present this to you once a year, and that would be the total number of students who have dropped out of the system, those who are of that age that can make that decision. And you can see that by building, and you'll see the total of 95. Just to give you a reference point, last year when I presented this data to you, that number in the far right column was 114. So you'll see a reduction in the number of students. I think part of that is connected to a report that you heard 2 weeks ago, or 2 meetings ago, of all the efforts that have been done around dropout prevention in the district and the team that's in place to help with that. So that's the data I wanted to provide for you around our mobility and dropouts.
Questions? I have Paul and Dinah.
Dr. Gross, just a quick question to clarify that last slide that you had up there that showed the dropouts from various places, north, south, Davies, Woodrow, Wilson. Does that mean that there were, among others, 60 people who enrolled at Woodrow, and then by the end of the year, 60 of them dropped out or went on? Remaining however many would be at Woodrow, but 60 more signed up than finished? Okay.
I'm just curious. I mean, we can't control people leaving the state for jobs and their parents and things like that, but do we have any idea why people leave or vice versa from the more local districts? Do we just?
We have not asked specifically of our neighboring districts if they have the same amount of data or type of data, but my assumption is that it is all related to work. And when parents move and are relocated, so do the families relocate to the new districts.
John.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Gross, I know I've asked this question in the past, and I'm just curious, why does Fargo South have such a significantly higher dropout rate, 2.5 times north and almost 3 times Davies? And this seems to be, it seems that we've had that kind of a pattern.
I think it'd be very difficult to point to one specific reason for that. I just think that is a facility where the students are making those choices. We certainly have put in place multiple measures to help students stay in school with our dropout prevention coordinator. Many of the time, or much of her time and effort, has been to work with the students at all of our facilities as our building principals have helped identify. And I think as we look at the data from last year to this year, we do see a reduction in that number of students. But it'd be hard for me to point out a specific reason.
Jeff, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I can just tell you straight out that it's a socioeconomic issue, it's a diversity issue, it's a cohort of students that are at South, and so we know that Fargo South has a student body of some students that are more challenging, and so we continue to work with that, and some of the efforts that we've put in place have been to directly address that. But those are all at-risk factors for kids dropping out of high school. And we know that's what the makeup is.
Again, I wished I had the chronology of these patterns or trends, but I want to say that I thought that was also the case before Davies came about as well. So I guess what I'm thinking is just from one board member's perspective to, and I know you do already, but drill deep as you can to know the roots of those issues and what they might be, and I know I'm assuming you are, but it's just always caught my attention that South is, and again, Davies had that population, they were combined, mostly before Davies came about.
Well, in response, we do drill down, and we are very aware, and we are working with it, and we understand it, and it's a challenge. And when kids make a choice to leave us, there's a variety of different reasons that happens. And it isn't from any effort lack of effort on our part to keep them there. I've never seen a situation where a student decides to leave where there hasn't been multiple levels of attempts to work with that student, from counselors to teachers to administration to all the factors that go into at-risk types of student issues. And so we'll continue to work on it. We're very pleased to see the number go down as it has, and we'll continue to work on it. But it is the nature of what we deal with.
Points well taken. Obviously paying a lot of attention to that. So, okay. Anything else on I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. Mobility report. No,
Nothing else.
no other reports. Okay. Dr. Agri and Dr. Gross, elementary enrollment projections.
Thank you. I'm just going to share a quick update of where we currently are and where we think we'll be with elementary enrollments. And if you remember, Dr. Gross shared in April the 6-12 projections. So what this first slide shows you is we look always at first day of school, and then obviously where we are right now, the elementary principal's last contract day was June 15th. So when they left, we were at 78 kids down from last year when school started, for a total of 3 sections, a lot of that being in our kindergarten. So if you look at the very top corner, we are down about 97 kindergarten kids from where we started last year. And we know with kindergarten registration, we have a lot of them come in July and in August because they just haven't really thought about it. So we know we will be catching up a lot of those kids. So our numbers look pretty good. And I want to share with you some trends over the last few years to show our growth and what that looks like. We track this every month, but typically we try to find a stable month for us, and so we look at April projections. And if you compare where we are in April, every year historically, as to where we were when we opened school the first day of August, you can see that there is an increase in 2012 from the first day, about almost 300 kids. In 2013, we had another nice increase, and then last year we were right at about 100 from April to when we opened the doors. And that's what that looks like here. You can see our increase. We've questioned why the 90 last year, why that happened. We're thinking that with our boundary software, with our push through communications to really get the word out about kindergarten registration, where the principals are sharing a lot with families through newsletters to tell your neighbors, tell your friends, bring your kids in, that we are getting kids in earlier, so we have a better idea every year of numbers. But again, with interest rates, flood mitigation, housing costs, we have no idea of the variables that are causing this. It's just a prediction for us. Just to give you an idea of where we've been over the last 5 years, you can see this is starting in 2009-10 through last school year. And what we have, our growth, we've gained kids every year at various numbers. But in the last 5 years, we've grown 591 students in our elementary since 2009. If you look at where we are April, again, of this spring, 2015, and you look at where we were as of last Friday, we had 918 kids this spring in kindergarten, and we have 807 registered right now for next year. That's a difference of 111 kindergarten kids that we anticipate still will register before the first day of school. And if you remember back when Dr. Gross shared with you that we're anticipating that our 6-12 enrollment will be up about 50 students, we are anticipating a growth of 161 students, K through 12, for next year from the 2014-15 school year. And if we look at the RSP data, they're saying that we should have an increase of about 100 to 150. So we're really feeling comfortable with those numbers and think we may even exceed those by a little bit. Questions on that?
Could you remind me, what was the RSP projection for kindergarten alone? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know we've consistently been in around that 900, and it was on either side of the 900 mark.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. And on to policy updates. Dr. Schatz, you want to introduce those?
Thank you. As we had mentioned earlier, in this spring, we have gone under the process of reviewing quite a few policies. Actually, this policy, 6310 and 6320, were reviewed during the school year and just haven't had the opportunity to bring them forward to you. So we bring this to you for your information, your questions, and your input. The two policies that I'll cover are 6310, 6320, and then Brock will cover some changes in 3210. So looking at 6310, a group of administrators were put together to take a look at what is our current practice and what does our current policy look like. And in 6310, really the outline of this particular policy is just talking about student conduct and discipline, and doesn't really get into the whole issue of suspensions and expulsions, those types of things. That is the other policy. So what we did in this policy is we just kind of did very little wordsmithing to it and updating of some of the different language that was in the policy, but we aligned the policy to be more of a K-12 policy, because there were two sections before. There was this elementary section and this secondary section, talked about minor and major violations and those types of things, and it didn't make sense. So that the biggest change is you see this alignment that goes K-12 within that policy, within this policy. And so we feel that this reflects practice and reflects some of the current thinking with regard to where we need to be with this. So if there's any questions, I'd certainly answer any questions that you might have on this particular one.
Rebecca?
My comment is in regard to this one and then the next one, the suspension and expulsion. And I was just wondering if, to be consistent, if we need to have language that would be, for example, parent, guardian, and representative. Because I noticed that those are used, sometimes it says parent and guardian, sometimes it says parent, sometimes it says parent and representative. So that's my only question for consistency. Thanks for the work.
When we get into policy 6320, which is the suspension expulsion policy, we took a hard look at this, and as we looked through it, there were things where we did a lot of wordsmithing. But again, on page 1, the list of things that fall into that area of things you can be suspended for or consideration for expulsion was actually shortened and wordsmithed quite a bit. And one of the things that we took out was truancy, because it just didn't make sense to have truancy in there. If a student has been absent from school for a period of time, and we're actually now classifying or categorizing that as truancy, why would we suspend that student when they come back? I think that is a past practice that schools used for whatever rationale that they had behind the use of that. I'm not quite sure, but that's been taken out. And then if you look at number 5, for example, in the wordsmithing, originally it had a number of lists of different drugs and different types of intoxicants, those types of things. And rather than having a specific list, we went with the more generic terminology so that it's all inclusive of those types of things, because those things change. So that's another area where you'll see some changes. In the enrollment of suspended students, that part on page 1, we made that much more concise. It actually had the board reviewing the students' records to determine whether or not they'd be allowed into the school district. And that's just not a function of the board. And so some of those things were taken out and just made it much more concise with regard to any student who comes to us from another school district who is currently under suspension or expulsion, that there would be a review process of what that incident was prior to letting them enroll within our school district. And so that's what that particular paragraph addresses. And then suspension, expulsion of students with disabilities, that was made much more concise also, because basically we follow the laws of special ed and 504 and American with Disabilities Act. So we didn't need to have all this verbatim in there of procedure, because those procedures are all outlined very specifically within those laws, and we do currently follow all of those. And so as you look through the rest of the policy, there was another part where conducting hearings for expulsions, recommended hearing processes, there was a few spots where they were duplicated. So we took those out to make the policy much more concise. So as you see before you, the policy that we've reviewed, this is where we've landed. I'll give you an example on expulsions, for example. How many times do we have to go to this policy for expulsions? This past year, we expelled 2 kids. You know, so this is not something that occurs often, but it is a process that's put in place for us so that when that situation comes along, we do have some kind of guidance with that. So that's the changes that we've made to this policy, and I guess I would answer any questions if anybody has them.
I have a request. It would be, since you're undergoing so many of these different policies, it would be helpful for me to highlight the changes.
Yeah.
Because I had trouble comparing the two.
And we need to do that in the future
You don't
ones,
mind?
and we're going to start doing that. So we've got quite a few that we're reviewing that we'll be bringing to you, and we'll have that highlighted.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
this one was reviewed a long time ago. This was actually in December, January, and then we took another look at it here recently, and we just hadn't brought it to the board, and so now we have, and so we'd like to move it forward because we've got student handbooks and those types of things that need to be printed and updated, so.
Typically, now I know a couple of our audience members were here, so building level principals, teachers, what kind of audiences are involved in the policy analysis?
It was primarily our administrative group.
Okay.
Yep. It's primarily the function of administrators to address suspension, expulsions, and working with their teachers. But teachers typically are not the ones who will suspend kids or do expulsions. It usually goes to the administrator. So we had quite a large group of administrators involved. I have Brad and Andy here tonight just for in case there were any questions with regard to any of the procedures they may use within their buildings. Okay.
I'm just sort of curious how it aligns maybe with other districts, if that's used in the approach when they're reviewing it, or, you know, I know you mentioned laws in terms of special education and their procedures, but
You would, to answer your question directly, no. But if you were to do that, most of these policies are aligned with the North Dakota School Board Association policies. So you will find very little differences between districts. So we typically don't do that because of that.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
To give this a little bit of historical context, you mentioned the truancy thing, but I think, is it correct that there is an emphasis to maybe use expulsion, suspension, expulsion less frequently? And is that something that is talked about, or has that been a shift at the administrative level, or shift in philosophy?
It certainly is something that is talked about all the time, because obviously the last thing we want to do is have a student out of school. But when those situations occur, when behavior is at a point where there needs to be some kind of intervention, this then at least gives us that guideline. I would, you know, our current numbers of suspensions for the school year, we're still finalizing that, but in a cursory look, they're actually gone down the last 3 years, both in school and out of school suspensions. And I think our administrators take a hard look at that. Again, the last thing we want to do is send a kid home for 3 days or for 5 days or for 10 days or whatever it might be. But there is, at times, a reason for a timeout. And my experience over the years is typically, if a student is suspended from school, it's a one-time thing. It's not an ongoing over and over and over thing. Now, you do have those situations where you have some students where sometimes they get suspended multiple times. But again, it's trying to deal with those behaviors, making sure that we have safe schools, that we have classrooms and environments where teachers can do their jobs, and making sure that we have processes in place to deal with those behaviors when they occur. And these policies have served us pretty well to this point. And so we think that what we've done here is just brought it up to date. We added some new references to a few different legal things that have changed over the last couple of years. And so we think we have a pretty good policy at this point.
Madam President, Dr. Schatz, I want to thank you for bringing this to the board. I don't believe this has come to the board before, and I acknowledge your team for responding to some requests to look at it. A question that comes to my mind is, when we go to national conferences, and you've touched on already truancy, and it seems to be more of a, which would be in sync with the national trends to somewhat loosen up the notion of zero tolerance. so it's not so etched in stone, and to also look at students with disabilities. Two thoughts that occur to me, though, I'd like a little visit with you about, or a little follow-up with. One of them is to what degree do our state and North Fargo's policies mirror the national recommendations from the National School Boards Association? I'm guessing so, but I'm not sure if there's any differences. And secondly, one other area that I remember some focus on, and this is just more for me to hear it, and not thinking that it's not going on, but a look at when there are suspensions, what happens to the students? You know, and I think that you could inform at least me about what kicks in then when a student is put into suspension. I'm assuming they just don't go home and they're gone.
And that's a great question. YouthWorks is the organization that we've had the opportunity to work with here in Fargo. And so anytime a student is suspended from school, they have the opportunity to go to YouthWorks. And so then but it is incumbent upon the student and the parent to follow up and do that. The work of the student is sent over to YouthWorks. They work with the student there. They have a full-time tutor that works with students. They also do some community service types of things when they're there. But any student who's suspended from school has access to all the work that they might miss by not being in school. We cannot hold that from them. And so even though they're not in the classroom, they still have the opportunity to make up the work. In the situation of an expulsion, we really try to provide any types of services that we can, whether it's at YouthWorks, whether it's online types of courses, whether it's tutoring types of things. I was impressed when I came to Fargo to the extent in which Fargo provides services for students that have been expelled, and with the addition of the YouthWorks opportunity for those kids to be there. So that's worked well for us. We've even bought bus tickets for kids who can't get there to make sure that they could get there, those types of things. So we really do try to do everything we can to continue on with that 2 or 3 day education while they're out. So.
And on the comparative sense for benchmarks, Dr. Schatz, are there any, in your observation, any national trends or standards that are different than here in North Dakota?
I think this is an ongoing conversation, and you know, obviously it's been reported, and there's, you know, a lot of attention being paid to it. So the national report that was done by the U.S. Department of Education, we shared with the committee. We all read. There was one other report that I found too that was addressing suspensions, expulsions of schools. And so those were the documents that were used. And I think that we are following all those guidelines. And really it's outlined for the most part when you have special education law, you have American Disabilities Act, you have Section 504. A lot of those things really dictate what we can do in policy. And you'll see those things reflected in the policy. So I think we're as modern, as up to date as we can be. I think our practice is appropriate, and it's serving us the way it should. The ongoing conversation of suspensions of students needs to continue to make sure that we are doing everything we can to ensure that we have kids in school versus out of school. And so our administrators work hard at that, and we'll continue with those conversations.
Seeing no other hands, we'll move on to the purchasing policy, and Mr. Leeds will lead us through that.
Madam President, members of the board, you have in front of you AP 3210, which is our purchasing policy, and we really just wanted to update this policy as we purchased last year a system called RecNet, which really helps us do a better job of setting up logistics for purchasing and also for inventory and inventory control. And so as we've implemented practices district-wide, we really needed to take a look at this policy and just give some very specific guidelines for what we expect to happen through the purchase order system, requiring that all purchases are made through the system with a purchase order, and if they're not going to be, giving very specific information and guidelines as to what purchases are allowed outside of that system. On page 2, we also have some threshold authorities that we've broken down and really given to various levels throughout the district, at departmental levels and building levels, as well as in the district office. And then we also reference and connect this to our bidding policies and procedures, and really just wanted to tie the whole process of purchases, bidding, et cetera, all into one policy. So this is really just an update of a policy that is much more specific. You see the old policy is the very last page, which was a single-page policy that was pretty generic and basic, that pretty much tied only to North Dakota Century Code. We have some practices in place even beyond what Century Code allows, and we just wanted to spell that out in policy and get that in front of you and let you know how we're monitoring that process. I can stand for any questions if you would have them.
John?
Madam President, Brock, I'm just curious, are there any circumstances here that would obligate us to review our own executive limitations, or anything that you see that puts them into any variance with this new administrative policy?
Members of the board, John, actually, no, I don't think there is. You see on the first page, we do reference EL9, which really helps guide some of those limitations that we have. And the reality is, I think what we've done is tried to bring our everyday practice and the purchasing policy consistent with the ELs 7, 8, and 9, which is the financial monitoring, budgeting, things of that nature. So I think maybe just the opposite, John. I think what we've done is really tried to wrap this all together and get them all consistent and talking to one another that keep us all on the same page.
And finally, this is great work, Brock.
Thank you.
I'm sure your auditors like it too, right?
Absolutely, and I have a great team of people who helped put this together. So I get to sit here and take the credit, and I've got a team that did a lot of the work.
Superintendent likes it too.
Okay, any more general staff reports? Anne Marie, did you have anything?
Oh, I don't think so, not this time.
Okay. Brock?
Nothing further at this time.
Not to put you on the spot, Brittany, but, no,
All good here.
okay. Dr. Agries, Dr. Gross?
I would just give you a quick update on a training that's taking place the rest of this week. We've talked a lot about the Marzano teacher evaluation tool and our plan to implement next fall. And we've also discussed the sub shortage we have and how we can help remediate that through not utilizing subs. So what we've done is we've, based on staff numbers at each site, we have dispersed the capacity for principals to identify an interested and willing teacher who would attend the training the next 2.5 days. And we are paying them through an additional grant that we were given through DPI for $25,000 of additional funds through Title IIA. So we're using them to bring the trainer in and as well as to pay the teachers. And then the teachers will turn around and provide training when it fits into either staff time or after-school sessions, and it will not need us to have a sub. And we have about 75 teachers registered.
Dr. Gross?
Nothing else at this time.
And Dr. Schatz?
Just wanted to mention a couple of things. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we had the Metro Tech Camp for the teachers. And I know I mentioned this to you before, but really a great event again this summer. 500 or so teachers attended that. But even subsequent to that is the Tech Camp for Kids. And we had that last week, and that was over at CBE. And so we've got 100 to 120 kids that are over at CBE, and they're doing all sorts of really interesting and quality types of projects. And so I just wanted to mention that because I think those are two things that really align also with our new strategic plan as we try to move forward with the whole concept of STEAM and technology and those types of things. And that these summer programs now are expanding and continue to enhance the opportunity for kids and teachers to be involved in those types of experiences. Tying into that also is the Education at Works project that we have going on with the EDC and with the Chamber and the other organizations in town that you saw last week, the report I sent you that was done to look at the overall job issue here in Fargo, the 6,000 openings that there are, the lack of available workers, and the alignment of what we're doing in our schools to make sure that we look at our CTE programs and all of our education programs to make sure that we're aligning with the needs of the community. I attended that meeting, and you know, it was interesting to me to just see all the different statistics that they brought forth and how a lot of that does align with what we're doing. And then finally, the administrators from all three of the metro area schools getting together at the Metro Tech Camp. And so Dr. Flowers, Lynn Kovash, and myself addressed the entire group. And the growth that I've seen in the mindset of our administrators from when we first started this over a year ago to where they're at now after 4 meetings where they've been together as a group is really talking about 21st century skills, project-based learning, all these types of things that we've been talking about succinctly through all of the 3 different school districts. So never before has there been such collaboration between the 3 school districts. And as the administrators continue to grow and learn and to lead what we need to lead forward with the schools, the teachers are coming along too. And so it's just at its infancy. But as you watch this grow, it's impressive. And when you're on the inside watching it, it's very impressive. So I just wanted to mention that the connectedness that's going on with our community, the business community, the schools, and all of those things is a great collaboration that most people don't hear too much about. And we're pretty proud of that. So over 1 year, we've made great gains. And so I just wanted to update the board on that. So.
Dr. Schatz, you mentioned the kids who came together at CBE for the tech camp. What grade levels were those kids, number one? And then number two, who supervises that? And that's, I guess, about it.
Yeah, it's mainly middle school kids, and it was Rob Arneson is one of our teachers who is at Washington. He's now going to be at CBE, working with the media specialists in the library area. He is the coordinator of that, and then there are other staff members within the districts of where these kids come from, because this is a collaboration too across West Fargo and other districts that are part of that, and then the people who actually run the sessions. And so it could be experts from different fields, or it could be some of the teachers that are involved in that are actually working with the students and teaching and sharing on the projects that they're doing, those types of things. So it's a real collaborative effort. But Rob is the main guy who organized the whole thing, and he's just done a terrific job. Their numbers went way up this year, and as long as Rob's running that, they're going to keep the growing. And he's in the right spot now that he's going to be at CBE because he can really manage this and help it grow. So it's pretty impressive.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Schatz? Okay. On to the consent agenda. I'm going to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Jim? Okay. Okay. Motion and second. All those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. We're good to go. On to our business section. Award of bids, Eagles Elementary. It looks like Jim Johnson's going to lead us through there.
Thank you, Robin. Well, the bid opening happened, and as had been kind of forecast at our last planning meeting, there were concerns that we might actually see bids come in above our $9 million threshold. And they did, but luckily they didn't come in as high as we had anticipated either. So I guess there was a little good with the bad. Long story short, to complete all of what is being recommended in Recommendation 1 and Recommendation 2 is an expenditure of $9,576,549 in total. Now, just to be fair to the process and to the work Brock and his team did, of that amount, $246,249 are really projects that were already slated in our long-range facility plan, the ongoing maintenance issues on the part of Eagles that exists today. So if we just look at the new footprint and the work involved with that, we're looking at $9,330,300. So approximately 3% over where we had ballparked on the very front end, where we were hoping to get this job done for $9 million, and a little bit below the $9.5 million that I shared at the last board meeting. That was the most recent estimate we had from the architect and construction management team working on this project with us, both of whom are here today, by the way. So if there are questions specific to any of the particular bid items, I'm sure we could call upon them to share them. The recommendation that administration is putting before us is to go forward with the base bid project and alternates 1 through 9. And again, many of those alternates were really already scheduled to come online in future years through our operational maintenance. So that $246,000, that's really those ongoing maintenance issues, would be funded out of our operations maintenance budget line in the general fund. the $9,330,000 will be getting funded through a combination of one of three potentials, all based on the building fund. We are not certain that this project will qualify for the new pool of low-interest state construction money. We're certainly going to forge ahead and try to get it approved, but it appears that legislative intent maybe isn't in sync with what this project is about. In particular, they say you have to fund it with voter approval. Well, our voter approval for our building fund happened in the 90s. And there are many people out in Bismarck that are thinking that doesn't qualify. That's not a current voter approval. Now, keep in mind they have two piles of money out in Bismarck to share. We are obviously in line with the Ed Clapp project to get that low interest money. That's a different set of rules. We think we're fully eligible there, and we should be pretty close to the front of the line on that project as the new money comes into that fund. So we think we'll still be participating with that state construction money on that project. We're hopeful on this one, but doubtful, to be honest. Which then leads us to the other two potential ways we could fund this project, or a combination of them. We certainly have the bonding capacity in the building fund. With the recent refinancing actions that we've taken, with the growth of the city, our building fund has this capacity and then some to put out this form of debt. And of course, I don't have the exact number, but I think we are floating right around about a $7 million fund balance in the building fund right now. So we could elect to maybe not bond for the full amount, use some of our hard cash and bond for a portion of it, or we might decide, let's keep the cash and bond for it all, depending upon what the forecast for interest rates come in at. If this project is approved to go forward tonight, we accept these bids, planning will be working with Brock and his team to really flush out, once we get a definitive answer on the state construction pool money, if we're eligible on this project or not, what then is going to be the recommendation we'll bring back for how we're going to actually fund this. So assuming we approve this tonight, we will have another action maybe as early as our July board meeting in terms of what approach are we going to use to fund the $9,330,000. The $246,000 of operational maintenance items is already budgeted and planned in our general fund budget. They just kind of skewed the years to get this all in sync right now. And one of the reasons for that, if you look at some of those items, there are things that may have been scheduled for 2 to 3 years from now, some for next year. But as long as we have the property free of students and under construction anyway, it makes a lot of sense to try and get all the work done over the course of this project timeline, as opposed to coming back 2, 3 years from now and disrupting the building as it's being used for educational purposes. Whether there's any savings, it's impossible to say, but there might actually have been some savings in the bidding of those alternates just because we don't have to displace things because the property's not going to have students in it during this construction season. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Obviously, Brock and the team from both MBA and Gertz are here and certainly can answer any detailed questions. I guess one last thing I will share, because I'm always trying to find whatever pennies we can save. There are two items, if you go to the larger detailed sheet, there are two items that theoretically could produce some savings to this project that I just want to make sure everybody's aware of. The very first item, which is general conditions, is a placeholder amount for the odd duck things that happen when you have a construction project. The renting of porta potties, if there's a need to fence in the construction site for safety and security concerns, and a number of other items. It's at least my understanding that the $254,100 is a conservative number, meaning that's going to be the high end of what this could end up being. Most likely, our general condition charges will come in less than that number. And then if you drop way to the bottom of that column, and you go 4 numbers up, you'll get to $202,796. That is our contingency fund. And again, that's a placeholder because you just never know when you, especially when you're doing an add-on to a building, what unknowns you might uncover in the process that then require a change order and require some dollars. But assuming we don't uncover any unknowns, and we're actually not anticipating any more unknowns than we already know about, but then again, they'd be an unknown, so hard to anticipate them. That 202,000, we may well not spend all of that money too. So potentially, we got about 450,000 in the 9.3 number, and at least a measure of that money will hopefully not get spent on the project. But again, we'd be approving up to those variables.
I see Brock's hand, but process or sequentially wise, sequence, we started out with a recommendation from the board. Was it for a certain amount?
Yeah, we gave a go-ahead to do the design, come up with a plan, and try to keep it at 9 million or less. I
Okay.
believe that was the board action.
Okay, thank you.
So
Okay.
at 9.3, we're not astronomically over, but we're certainly over that number.
Okay, thank you. Brock?
Madam President, members of the board, just a few additional things to what Jim had alluded to. If you draw a line, if you look right below number 33, site utilities, and then right below that is total bid packages, that is the number that we shared with planning. When we looked at total bid, we really looked at base bid. What do we need to do on a base bid to move forward? So you'll see that we're very happy with how the bids came in from a base bid perspective. All along in this project, we were bidding alternates for 2 reasons. One is the 3 that we selected for this project are very standard in what we do in construction, specifically terrazzo flooring and burnish block. It's about long-term maintenance of the facility. With the high traffic areas that we put the burnished in or the terrazzo flooring, really just wear and tear in those facilities and ability to maintain it. The other alternates, as Jim alluded to, we really did bid as a result of they're in the long-range plan, and so we moved those up. And just so you're aware, when Jim talked about savings, we looked out at the next 3 years, what we had planned, and we had $300,000 set aside over the next 3 years to do the projects we're looking at here in the alternates, and the total is 246 and change. So we feel good again about the fact that we got good bids on those, and we move them up, and we'll save some money there, which I think is very important. So again, just to make sure that everybody is aware of, the base bid is what we shared at planning, so I don't want people to necessarily look at that plus the alternates really put us at a number we didn't know about. It was really about doing the base part. And then really our rationale for why we're choosing the alternates we are, specifically those tied to this project. And I think it's a cost savings long-term to make sure that from a wear and tear perspective, our buildings are what we expect them to be.
Jennifer, did you have your hand up?
So the portion that you mentioned that may or may not come out of the operations fund for these maintenance items that we're just moving up to do sooner rather than later, makes sense, but does that push back anything for the other buildings?
Yeah, members of the board, Jennifer, what we would do is, theoretically, yes. But what we would do is we'd look at the entire list, and when we look at what's on the docket for this year, those items this year are prioritized as well. The must-haves, because we just can't get another year out of them. Jim and his team, we really ranked them on a 1 to 5 scale every year, and we said, okay, the 1s are the must-haves, they absolutely have to happen. The 5s are the ones that we know we tried to level the operational maintenance, so we had about $2.7 to $2.8 million every single year, knowing that some of those items you could probably still get another year out of. And so what we will do is we'll balance that at this point, and we'll say, okay, because it makes sense to do these, what do we think we could put that we would have done this year, but really we can get another year or two? It might be windows, it might be roofing, it might be something that yes, it needs to be done, but it's not imperative, if that makes sense. So it's not gonna be detrimental to any of those facilities that aren't going to get something done. And also, if you recall from our long-range facility plan, every building has something scheduled in it nearly every year, because we tried to really look at how do we, eliminate having the haves and have-nots. We try to maintain all of our facilities at a standard level and don't leave people behind, and we're really doing a better job of that, and I think the plan has really helped with that.
So, as a follow-up to that, are there additional funds that could be taken from, whether it's the building fund for this project, so that it doesn't take away from the maintenance and have, so you don't have to shift it around?
Sure. Members of the board, Jennifer, you really got a number of options. You could choose as a board to say, we're comfortable having this project be a $9.5 million project and fund that project accordingly. What we did as an administration is said to you, we would carve out about $250,000 of that because we were going to do that work anyway to keep with the spirit of what you told us, which is up to $9 million. And knowing that when the bids came in, it might be a little higher, it might be a little lower. About $105,000 of that are the alternates we chose to take as part of the project. You could certainly direct us and say, we're comfortable that instead of 9, it's 9.5, and don't take it out of operational maintenance, do it all as part of this project. We just felt like trying to be very upfront and give you all of the information that we wanted to do as much as we could to stay within the spirit of what you directed us to do, and also let you know very clearly that some of those things we're going to spend the money on. We don't want to tuck those away somewhere else. We're just going to tell you what the total is and how we would anticipate doing it. You tell us how you'd like it paid for, and we will do that.
John? Oh, I'm
Madam
sorry.
President, Jennifer, your questions are exactly where my mind was going. And, I suppose we could look at this and go, we'd set a ceiling, hoping not to go over 9 million. And we had a little bit of cushion in our minds when we did that, but in reality, we won't be seeing these numbers less than a year from now. I'm guessing in the economy we're in. So that's I'm okay with that. I'd prefer that we called it what it is, a $9.5 million project, and I would prefer, my preference would be to simply fund it, the additional amount through the building levy, the building fund. That would be my preference. I've seen us in the past dip into the maintenance fund. We used to call it deferred maintenance, and now we call it ongoing maintenance. But I've seen us dip into that and have a consequence down the road for other projects and buildings. And that'd be my personal preference, would be to just simply, and I'm very prepared to offer an amendment to recommendation number 2 when we get to that point, to direct that funding to come out of the building fund. Whether we use bonds or whether we use a state loan fund or whether we use the bonds and the loan fund and or a combination of the building fund, in my head, I'd prefer it all came out of that approach.
Jeff?
I appreciate that comment. And the one thing I just wanted to make a point about the long-range facility plan is the beauty of that plan, the dynamic part of that plan, is that it has flexibility. And that's how we built it. And the review of that plan every year provides that flexibility. So it's a very dynamic plan. A lot of times you'll see people put facility plans together and they'll say, this is what we're doing and that's in stone. All along, it's been built to be flexible. So you have the choice and you can direct us as you want, but by moving those monies forward in a few of those projects isn't going to impact anybody else, because you're just going to shift some things around and we're going to be just fine. So I just want you to know that that plan, that yearly plan, we call it the 10-year plan, but it's really the yearly plan, has a lot of flexibility built into it. So if you want to move forward and do some of those things using those operational costs, because we're already planning to do them, you're not going to hurt any other projects in the long-range facility plan. So I'll just let you know that. But again, it's, you guide us as to what you want to do with the overall project. And if it's to put it all in one bundle, that's fine too. But it was, I think, really prudent on Brock's part to bring that forward to show you that we could do that if we wanted to. So I think that's the strength of that plan. You should be really proud of that facility plan and how that's playing out right now each year for us.
There's an action required on this item after that discussion. Jim?
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the bids for a total of $9,576,549 and change for the base bid and alternates 1 through 9,
Second,
as per memo 143.
second.
Got a motion and a second. More questions? John?
Just for a point of clarification, Madam Chair and Jim, are you leaving that second recommendation aspect of this total to be included in the overall funding package, or how are you delineating that in your motion intent?
What I'm trying to attempt to do is to approve the bids that have been opened, and then planning will be working with the administration to figure out how do we want to pay for this $9,576,000. Based upon this conversation here, that'll certainly be looked at. But I will note that bonding for the full amount versus taking it out of what was planned for in operational maintenance increases the cost, because now we're going to be paying interest on the $246,000 at a much higher rate than we're going to earn on the $246,000 in the bank, I'm afraid. But again, we're going to look at all that at planning and come back with how do we plan to fund this, probably at our July board meeting. So this is just to approve the bids so the project can get underway. We know we have multiple ways to fund it. We're then going to dive in and figure out, once we get confirmation on the state construction loan, what's the best way to go. Because if we can get that 1% money, we're going to take it. And that particular, just so you understand why I don't want to tie us, the state construction money, if it happens, requires we fund 20% somehow. They'll only fund 80%, at which time we'll probably be using building fund reserve or fund balance, and probably some of the operational fund for these maintenance items. But that's what we'll be discussing at planning and come back with a second action in terms of how we'll fund the 9.5. But it approves both sides of their recommendation, just nothing to do with the funding yet. Long answer.
Jennifer?
Okay, so just an additional question, and perhaps this was asked at planning and I couldn't be there, but new school ed clap cost us 12.25. Do we know?
Members of the board, Jennifer, all in
Yeah.
with everything included, just over 15 million.
15 million. And so this, we're approaching 9.5, and we get a 3-section school. I feel like I need to ask, like, is this the best? And I was on long-range facility plan. I'm on board with Eagles. I understand that we need it. We're growing. We need the room. But can we address that? Can we talk about that? What happens if we don't do it? I want to hear it, and I think some folks want to hear it if we don't do it.
I just want to address one thing that came up at planning, and what happens if we don't do it. I'll leave that to the boss to my left here. We talked about what's the overall price tag that we were anticipating on this project compared to the Ed Clapp site. And we really look at it not as the total cost, but the square footage cost. That's the easiest way to boil it down. We had slightly higher site development work over at Ed Clapp because we had to take all that soil out, repack it down with, I'll get the geology wrong, but repack it down, put it back in, and then build on it. So that was a little more site preparation cost. And of course, we're dealing with a little inflation in the trades and in the construction material industry. But overall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brock, we felt on a square footage cost basis, this was actually coming in a little less than we thought compared to some of the other projects going on in the community right now. And obviously, some people gave us bids that were very, very competitive compared to what we thought they were going to price out at. So we viewed it, and yes, it's a smaller school, it's a 3-section school, but we viewed it overall as well within the price range for the square footage of what we're building. And the quality of construction is basically replicated of what we're doing at Ed Clapp. The gym is going to be a little smaller because it's a smaller student body there. in terms of total students, but the hallways, the amenities, the size of the classrooms are all very comparable to what we've done at Ed Clap.
Jeff, did you want to address that?
Sure. If we were to not do this project, what would happen would be you would be building an elementary school somewhere out south of Davies, probably for 20 million by the time that time would come. You would have overcrowding at Lincoln that would continue to a point of where we would probably have to put 2 to 3 relocatables there. You would have a rapid infill of Bennett, and so then your timeline as to when you choose to build a new school south of Davies would have to be accelerated depending on how fast that building fills. The whole idea of the Eagles project is an infill project, which we hear a lot about in our city, so it goes with the 2030 plan, to create a neighborhood school for the area that has not had that for all these years, and then to create proactively the space in Bennett, Centennial, and Kennedy so we can put off having to build a new elementary school for probably several years. And so if you don't do this, then that's going to come a lot quicker, but it's going to be at a much higher cost in an area that is also got issues and concerns about flooding. So that's your options.
Paul?
Speaking directly to the motion, which really involves not so much should we go ahead with this project, because we've pretty much already decided in the past to go ahead with the project, but it speaks specifically to, do we feel comfortable authorizing the various alternates that are down there, and do we feel comfortable taking the money from one fund versus the other? I hope we can all move forward and approve this, because when you look at it, really, the way it's been explained, we're probably within 2% of what we thought our estimate was, which is a pretty good guess of where we should be. We know the positive benefits of doing this elementary school. So really the only question is, do we feel comfortable being 1 or 2% off of where we thought we might be? And given the current economic environment in the construction trades, that's a pretty good slice right there. So I'm just urging us that we move ahead and get this thing done and make it happen. And hopefully planning will help us figure out how we're going to finance it.
Okay. John?
Madam Chair, one more time, Jennifer, I'm going to thank you for getting us to have a more rigorous conversation, and also to remind ourselves of where we're going, and Dr. Schatz, your view long-term. I think that's important tonight to remind us of the implications of infill versus development out where the areas are sprawling to, and walkability and access and neighborhood schools and all of that. I think we all wish this price had come in under 9 million, but you know what? We're going to get a lot of bang for the buck by building on land we already own, modifying a facility, a structure we already own, adding on to that structure. And when it comes to planning, of course, I will lobby for all of the funding to not come out of the general fund. I will lobby personally for it to come out of the bigger package, which will include the building levy fund, the state loan construction, and the bondings. But Jennifer, thanks for, sometimes people in the public might not remember the history of how we got to tonight, and the long months and months and months of processes to get to this point. And the consequences of us not are going to have a whole different set of costs to kids and to families and to boundaries and so on. But thank you for having us have that discussion. I think it's really, really important we do that.
I agree, thank you. And I can vouch for the size, how full those schools are. Not just the educational services are limited in the class sizes, but also the social services that nonprofits like mine try to, but cannot fully serve that family body. So I see a lot of heads nodding and I see no hands, so I think we need a roll call. Anne Marie?
Paulson?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes.
Goldenberg?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Knutson? Yes. Myers?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes, motion carries. Looks like we're at about an hour, so let's take a break until shortly before 6:45 for board reports. Thank you. Okay, we'll start again. And we are on to our board reports section. So committee liaison and correspondence reports. Dinah, would you like to start us off?
Nothing for me today, thank you.
The Community Development Committee at the city sent out a notice that we will not be meeting for our regular meeting in June, so I have nothing to report.
Paul?
Well, we're already aware of this, but the FPS Foundation, our executive director, Carol Johnson, is retiring and heading off to Florida, and that's going to happen during the summer, and I think we're somewhat aware of that. But what a great difference she has made to the foundation over the past number of years that she's been here. An amazing difference.
David?
Yeah, I've got to take a couple of minutes tonight. I've been on the governing board of the Cass County Career and Tech Ed Center this year. There's one board member from Northern Cass, one from West Fargo, and then myself. And I wanted to just tell you briefly about what is happening. The CTE has acquired funding through the state to provide some classes for students in West Fargo and Northern Cass that wouldn't be readily available. And just very quickly, they offer automated manufacturing where the kids not only produce various products, but they also go through the design mode. They have botany available. They have a greenhouse out at Northern Cass, which is up and fully functioning now. Aviation 1 and 2, Diesel 1, medical terminology, and welding 1 and 2. And the total enrollment for this fall is 254 students. It's pretty cool what they're doing. Denise Jonas is the director of the CTE, and I mean, these kids are getting opportunities to do some stuff that we just can't provide as a district. We meet 3 times a year. We just had our last meeting. We don't meet again now until August. And I'm not going to go through the budget or anything like that. Some of the classes that they're looking possibly at in the future are things such as veterinary sciences, and they want to get a CNA program going because there's a huge demand for certified nursing assistants. And those are all things that Denise is currently looking at and exploring the possibility of getting more funding. But it's been interesting being on the board, and I look forward to working with them again next year. Thanks.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Rebecca?
I have nothing to report.
Summer's kind of quiet for us, huh? John?
Madam Chair, just a couple follow-ups from GAC related items. The congressional recess our administration has reported to us is after August 10th, so they're still looking to see when we can have that localized alternative to FRN, Federal Relations Network, done locally with our congressional people. And I think at some point, maybe Anne Marie knows, or Mary Ann, we have a letter that we're going to be signing. Is that, there we go. At some point, I'll see them. Thank you.
Is that it, John? Okay. Jim?
A couple items. Planning's next regularly scheduled meeting would be July 3rd, and for some reason that may not be the best date for a lot of people because it's Friday before July 4th weekend. So I believe tomorrow, those of you that are in planning will be getting a little, I don't know what we call them, doodle survey or whatever, looking for possible dates, because we clearly have to have one more planning meeting, hopefully just one more before our July meeting so we can finish up our work on the budget and have that ready to go for the July board meeting. The SEEC had an executive board meeting. It's kind of called on the spur of the moment. I'm not quite really sure after I attended it what the heck we had a meeting for, because there wasn't much on the agenda. But we are going to have a July board meeting as well, as we try to determine the approach and timeline to becoming a freestanding entity, which will be an interesting thing for me to watch unfold. And the last thing I have is there's a picnic coming up in August. Just make sure you have it on your calendar. And if you think about it and you're out and about, you might just want to ask somebody if they want to donate a door prize and then get them over here to Anne Marie, so we can once again have a great summer picnic with our year-round staff.
And the date of that is, Jim?
I don't know.
August 4th.
August 4th.
It's never too soon to
get
start
prizes.
asking.
Gotcha.
The sooner, the better.
Okay, fair enough. The 4th?
Yes, one quick, no, I have a quick reminder.
Go ahead.
Sorry, quick reminder to Jim's announcement about planning. Those of you on planning, remember you'll be getting that from Jolyn Schmid, not Mary Ann. So if you're
Oh.
looking for something from Mary Ann, that will not happen. As she, her last day was Thursday, so just a reminder when you see that pop up.
Okay, thank you. No meeting tomorrow. And this is called the President's Report, but it's really Anne Marie's report, because she sent me the entire contents. So board retreat, July 21st, board cabinet night at Trollwood, July 23rd, RSVPs to Anne Marie. Jim's got it, or we have our all-staff picnic August 4th. The back-to-school opener is August 24th. And the next governance committee with the current committee before restructuring will be July 7th at 7:30. And I didn't have anything else to report besides that, so any other reports, John?
Yes, Madam Chair. Helmut's birthday. Sorry, Helmut, you're stuck with me too on this. July 7th, if I recall.
Okay. All right. Next regular meeting is July 14th. Any items for debriefing? Okay. We'll see you soon. Have a good night.